I worked for a hotel company for 8 years, and at the age of 30, I realized I had a very high need for autonomy. So I made a decision to become an entrepreneur. And I'm still wondering if that was the smartest choice. For the next 30 years, I started, built, and led several small to medium-sized companies in different industries. I was what I would consider highly functional and fairly successful. So I don't come from the world of neuroscience originally. I was a working professional like many of you, dealing with all the same pressures, ups and downs. I didn't have a healthy relationship with stress, as Laura was mentioning, during this time of my life. Carried some unhelpful mental patterns with me from an early age, resulting from my upbringing. I was intense, prone to anger, defensive, and had a high need for perfectionism and to prove myself every day, mostly to myself. Other than that, I was a peach. I also had a genetic predisposition to addiction and began to cope with these unhelpful mental patterns with alcohol. And at the age of 52, I succumbed to addiction and entered rehab, needing to rebuild my life and myself. Previously, I knew nothing about my brain. I just figured it was there to serve me, and what it gave me was what it gave me. But my journey into recovery led me to the world of neuroscience, where I have used the principles to transform my own life and now help other professionals understand how their brains work and how to level up brain performance. I sure wish I knew then what I know now. It's a real honor to be with you here today, and I'm grateful so many of you decided to be here. Thank you for your time. We're going to get right into it. I'll try and keep it light and entertaining with tons of value. We'll see if we have time for questions at the end, but if not, I encourage you to please reach out to me. We can connect by Zoom or by email. You'll see my email here at the bottom right hand corner of this slide, and I'll also give some contact information at the end. My objective today is to stimulate your curiosity about your brain, perhaps to cause you to look differently at your brain than you have in the past, to look at it more objectively, something you can change and mold. I'm hopeful you will consider your brain as your partner in your life. But like any partner, it has needs just like you do. We demand a lot from our brains every day. We can get frustrated when it either doesn't perform as we would like or tries to tell us through its various forms of mental friction that it's not getting what it needs. My question to you is, how do you view your brain? And what type of relationship do you have with it? If it's not a give and take, scratch my back and I'll scratch yours type of relationship, my mission today is to get you to reconsider that stance. Before we proceed, I also want to make a comment to those of you who are managing teams of people. Understanding how your brain works is obviously not only valuable for your own brain performance, but it greatly enhances your ability to manage other people. When you understand how their brain works, you can create cultures that tap into how to derive the most productivity out of them. You can create work environments that work with your team's brains instead of potentially against it. Brain trivia. Brain weighs 2 pounds, but consumes 20% of your energy, the most of any organ in your body. It's composed of 60% water, 40% solids. These solids are comprised of 60% structural and functional fats, mostly lipids, and this is not the same type of fat that's stored in your body, and protein, which is also used for brain structures and production of neurotransmitters and brain enzymes. The brain needs a steady supply of protein, lipids, which are again healthy fats, also known as like avocados, olive oil, salmon, glucose from carbohydrates, water, vitamins, and minerals throughout the day in order to produce the inputs it needs to function. These raw materials are carried to the brain by the blood. The brain has very little storage capacity for any of its inputs. Inputs like ATP, which is the energy form that the brain uses, neurotransmitters, enzyme, cofactors, etc. So it needs a steady supply from you of these raw materials during and throughout the day through the blood in order to keep fueling your brain. In short, if you are not eating and drinking the right things throughout the day, all day long, at the right intervals, as your brain functions, you're going to run out of mental resources, starting to feel the negative mental effects leading to a drop in brain performance. As soon as you wake up and start using your brain, it ramps up its consumption of energy, neurotransmitters, enzymes, hydration, etc. And if it doesn't have the raw materials it needs to produce more as it's working and as it's increasing consumption, it runs short, which is when you experience mental fatigue, fog, anxiety, irritability, and other mental friction. The brain is the body's command center. It runs every system in your body. It drives every decision. It's the primary mechanism through which we determine our success, fulfillment, and happiness in life. The brain has lots of theoretical capacity, and we only use a small fraction of it. It has 85 billion neurons, which are the brain cells that do most of the work. Each neuron has up to 10,000 connection points where it can receive information, which equates to a capacity of 850 trillion total connection points called synapses, where bits of information can be sequenced and encoded. More information bits can mean more intelligence, and that intelligence can dramatically affect your life. Now, we can't use all the brain's theoretical capacity or it would get too noisy in our heads and our heads might explode. But it's safe to say we can create significantly more intelligence by pushing our brains to learn more, taking advantage of some of this available capacity. More and better utilization of intelligence capacity is the very first pillar of brain performance. More intelligence equals better brain performance. What difference could another level of brain performance make in your life? Here are the pillars of brain performance. Brain performance isn't about IQ scores or about being born naturally smart. That certainly doesn't hurt as a starting point, but it's not the end-all be-all. Over the long haul, it's about how effectively your brain can generate, regulate, and apply all its resources in real time, at work, in relationships, and in your personal life. And it comes down to these four pillars. The first is intelligence. Again, not as a number like IQ, but as a capacity of different trainable domains. They're like brain skill sets, like memory, attention, decision-making, motivation, emotional regulation, and social intelligence, that all together, as a collective, form a much broader, more representative measurement of intelligence than just IQ. If you think about all the things you have to use in your life to be successful, IQ is just a small piece of what you need. So that's right, memory or decision-making or focus or leading people are all brain skills. They're all measures of intelligence that can be trained and improved over time. We all know we need a lot more than just IQ to achieve our goals in life. In fact, our business leaders, like you guys, are rarely the men and women with the highest IQs in their companies. They have developed highly develop skill areas across their brain domains, not just processing speed or knowledge retrieval, which go into making IQ. Being a great leader of people or a great strategist doesn't show up on an IQ test. IQ is just a single narrow measurement of a specific slice of intelligence, which shows how well you answered certain types of questions on a specific day in a time test environment. The second pillar of brain performance is our mental resource tank, which is the collection of fuel that power the brain, including ATP, neurotransmitters, enzymes, hydration, and cofactors. Cofactors are vitamins and minerals. The third pillar of brain performance is your nervous system, your ability to access the right nervous system state at the right time for the situation at hand in the moment, whether that's being in recovery, being in a task positive state, or a high energy performance state. If you're not accessing the right nervous system state for what the moment demands, your brain can't perform as needed, or it will burn through its mental resources at an accelerated rate and tap out before the end of the day. And the fourth pillar is spending your mental resources efficiently. How wisely you spend your tank of mental resources in the moment and throughout the day, so you don't run out before the day is done. If you ever find yourself experiencing mental fatigue in the afternoons or episodes of brain fog, this means you have drained your mental resource tank of resources and are still asking your brain to perform without fuel. It's like running your car without oil. These four pillars work together to account for your level of brain performance. When they're aligned and managed optimally, brain performance soars. When one falls short, brain performance suffers. You can really move the needle on how well your brain performs, but only if you know how the brain works and what levers to pull to affect performance. Brain performance exists on as broad a spectrum as your physical fitness. Think of the best and worst physical shape you've ever been in your life. For most of us, I know for me, that's a broad spectrum. Many of us are unaware that this spectrum is as broad as it is for the brain, as well as what levers to pull to affect its performance level, and exactly how to pull these levers. I invite you to be curious about whether your brain might be capable of more, what it might need to improve its performance, and how to go about partnering with it to move the needle. Before we talk about solutions, let's talk about what poor brain performance actually looks like in our lives. Because I know in talking to many of you, that's what you relate to when things aren't going right. These are the everyday symptoms that many of us experience, but often don't realize they're rooted in how the brain is operating. When mental resources are low, the brain slows down. You'll notice fog, fatigue, sluggish thinking, or forgetfulness. Decisions take longer. Processing feels harder, and it becomes difficult to hold attention for very long stretches of time. This isn't just about cognition, it also affects how we feel. Stress levels rise, anxiety kicks in, irritability goes up, and motivation drops. Instead of responding calmly, we find ourselves reacting. These struggles also show up in how we behave. Procrastination ratchets up. Avoidance, multitasking, and distraction become the norm. Making good priorities feels impossible, and follow-up starts to slip. The brain and body are connected. Poor performance shows up as low energy, poor sleep, midday crashes, muscle tension, and restlessness. People often think these are separate health issues, but they're deeply tied to brain performance. And finally, these issues spill into leadership. Poor communication, difficulty motivating others, lack of empathy, and strained relationships. When your brain isn't resourced, it shows up in how you lead. What's worse is every time we experience a pain point, the neurons in the brain that physiologically represent the pain point become stronger. So it's like a repetition in the gym. When you repeat something in the brain, it gets stronger and more ingrained, therefore making it more likely that pattern will repeat in the future in similar contexts. So when people try to solve these pain points with surface level fixes, like the Band-Aid in this illustration, they're treating symptoms, not the root cause. A neuroscience approach works best because it goes deeper. It trains the brain itself at the root system level, the roots that create these pain points in the first place. We're not band-aiding anything in neuroscience. We're surgically identifying the causes, treating them so they don't recur, and putting in new, more helpful patterns to replace what was causing the pain point. Let's go over a couple of brain myths. The first one is the brain is fixed and can't change. Many people believe the brain is fixed, and once you hit adulthood, your brain is basically set in stone. It's why phrases like, "you can't teach an old dog new tricks," become so common. But I'm here to tell you that the brain is actually designed to change. And believe it or not, it does so every single day, whether you're aware of it or not. This is called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural pathways, which are really just brain cells that have connected to one another to form a mental experience like a thought, feeling, or behavior, strengthening or weakening existing ones and pruning out old ones. Every thought you repeat, every skill you develop, every emotional reaction you have, your brain is literally rewiring itself in response. Rewiring means creating or changing strings of neural connections in your brain, and it's happening all day, every day. Your entire mental life is represented in your brain by these neural pathways. All of you have maps in your brains of how these neural pathways have formed. Every one of your brains looks different because you've all had different past experiences. So why does neural wiring matter for brain performance? Because it means your intelligence, your focus, your habits, your ability to regulate emotions, your entire mental life, none of it are fixed traits. Everything you experience mentally is negotiable. It's changeable. Your brain is constantly updating its wiring in response to your choices and experiences. Your brain is merely a reflection of what you've trained it to be. The more intentional you are about what inputs you give your brain, meaning how you think, emote, behave, learn, etc., the more you can direct the plasticity to work for you. In short, if you don't like what's happening in your consciousness, you can change it if you know how. So the brain isn't a finished product. It's a living, evolving system. And thank God for me that it is. The question isn't, can my brain change? It's, am I guiding the change that's going to happen anyway in the way that's most helpful to me? Or is my mental life just happening by default and by accident? Myth number 2, brain performance declines as we age. A common belief is that performance naturally declines as we age, that memory slips, slower thinking, and reduced focus are just inevitable. But neuroscience doesn't agree. While some biological changes with age are real, the brain remains remarkably resilient and adaptable. It can grow new neural connections and even new neurons well into later life. The key to that is whether we continue to give the brain the right inputs. Inputs like challenge, novelty, and proper care. Studies of lifelong learners like musicians, people that learn multiple languages, show that continued training keeps the brain sharp, often outperforming younger people who don't train and exercise their brains. The brain is like a muscle. Strengthens with use and weakens with neglect. Lifestyle factors make a massive impact here. Sleep quality, consistent physical exercise, balanced nutrition, and stress regulation all protect and even expand cognitive capacity. Regular cognitive challenges, learning new skills, problem solving, engaging in deep work, literally expand the brain's capacity and fortify the neural networks that resist decline. So aging doesn't have to mean losing brain performance. With the right habits and training, we can sustain, in some cases, even expand our brain performance well into older age. As we've said, most people think of intelligence as a fixed number, often tied to IQ. But neuroscience tells us intelligence is far broader and more flexible. In our model, the brain is made up of 16 domains. These are functional outputs or skill sets from the brain, like our ability to pay attention, our working memory, our cognitive processing speed, our motivation and reward sensitivity, our social intelligence, and more. Each domain is powered by a network of specialized brain regions. All of this is made up by neurons working together. When you strengthen one domain, like strengthening, one of your body parts in the gym, you are strengthening the underlying network or networks that powers it. You positively impact the other domains, creating a beneficial performance ripple across your entire brain. The key insight here is that domains are trainable and expandable, just like muscles in the body. The brain's skill sets or intelligence can grow stronger with the right inputs, practice, and training. What follows is the list of the 16 trainable domains in the brain, which again are skill sets or functional outputs of the underlying brain regions, which are connected together into networks to dynamically produce these skill sets we call brain domains. So we have all this plumbing in our brain that is producing these outputs or skill sets. As an example, think of a brain domain as walking, which is produced by our legs. So the functional output or skill set of our legs is to walk. To be able to walk, we need specialized muscles like the quadricep, the hamstring, and the calf. And all these muscles need to work together dynamically as a network to produce our ability to walk. All our brain domains or skill sets are produced by these types of networks or combinations of brain parts, or in the case of our analogy, muscles, working together in coordinated ways. Just like our muscles work together in different muscle groups around our body to produce physical skill sets. When we bench press, for example, our pectoral, triceps, and shoulder muscles work together to achieve a pressing motion, which is the functional output or the domain of these different muscles working together in a network. Hopefully this analogy makes some sense because it's translatable to the brain. We won't bog down right now on each of these specific brain domains, but I'll give you a moment to scan them and look at the examples I've given below each one as to what that domain might translate into in your professional worlds. Each of these domains, powered by networks of brain regions working in synchrony, produce functional outputs as you might experience them in your real life. Instead of training muscle fibers like we do when we work out physically, in brain training we train neurons. Neurons respond to training. They become fitter and more responsive the more we train them. The more we train them, the strength and endurance they develop. The more we train the strength and endurance they develop, the same as an athlete would experience in their muscles. During training, neurons actually move around in the fluid of the brain, forming new connections with neighboring neurons, or sending a cable called an axon terminal to a far-off region in the brain to connect with another group of neurons that are part of the skill set we are training. The brain does this all by itself in response to the training that you want to develop, the skill set. All of these new neural connections, which end up looking like a gnarly spider web in our brain, that you are adding when you train the brain, make up the added intelligence you are adding to the brain domain you are training. When we're more physically fit, every type of physical activity seems to be easier and more coordinated, right? Even going to the grocery store when we're physically fit seems easier. That's because the muscle fibers that we're training are tuned up and in high performance mode. If you actively train your brain to be in high performance mode, the neurons become fitter and more primed to be flexible and do even more learning. We can specifically target any of these intelligence domains with specialized training that can and will increase the utilization and capacity of that domain. Because the neurons become fitter and more responsive, new learning starts to become easier. We can build a training regimen for any of these 16 domains of intelligence, thus improving the utilization and expanding the capacity of that domain. With respect to all of you, doing our jobs every day, if the work is redundant, while demanding as it is, doesn't count as expanding the intelligence capacity of a brain domain, because after a while, if it's redundant, there's no new learning and no pushing the limit of intelligence. If you lift weights and do the same number of reps at the same weight every time you go to the gym, then you'll stall out and you won't further increase your strength. You stay at your current strength level. Doing the same types of things over and over again mentally does not expand intelligence, which is why domain training involves specialized exercises and activities designed specifically to increase the underlying capacity of a particular domain. That's why if we see an area of our intelligence that needs improvement and might open some new doors for us in our careers, we need to specifically target that domain with specific training that will move the needle and unlock our advancement. Here's the last of the 16 brain domains, again, also known as functional outputs or brain skill sets. When you sum up all the capacity we've developed in our lives across all of these 16 brain domains, we can then add up our overall functional level of intelligence. Using our physical fitness analogy, when you combine the strength and conditioning of all your muscle groups, you get your overall physical fitness level. We know we can go to the gym and train our different body parts in a variety of different ways to improve our physical fitness level in all those body parts. The same exact principle applies to our intelligence. We can train each of our brain domains in a variety of different ways to expand intelligence, as well as improve the quality of what we are encoding in that capacity. When you develop your existing intelligence capacity more effectively and start adding to it through challenge and training, you are on your way to producing more brain performance. Expanding intelligence capacity through brain training is the first pillar of optimizing brain performance. Another myth: we only use 10% of our brain. This is one of the most popular myths. And the idea that we only use 10% of our brain structures is false. Brain scans show that nearly every part of the brain has a different function and is active at different times. Even when you're resting, whole networks are firing. In other words, all of our structures are being used. Here's what is true and where the opportunity for all of us lies. While we use all of our brain cells, we only use about 10% of their theoretical capacity. The opportunity is with the right inputs, training, and recovery, we can expand the amount of capacity we are using in each of these neurons. I know what you're thinking. Wow, you mean I have 9 times the amount of intelligence, or I can have that much more than I have now? Well, we can never use anywhere near close to 100% of our capacity 100% of the time. There would be way too much electrical and chemical current in the brain, and there would be too much noise and our heads might explode. We're also constrained by the amount of mental resources it takes to run the brain. Remember, it's 2 pounds but consumes 20% of our energy, so it's a real energy hog. And lastly, the bandwidth of the brain cell structures drops during the day due to fatigue, and it needs to be reset at night when we sleep. This is analogous to you working out really hard physically, and the bandwidth of your body, your muscles, fatigues, and you need to allow it to reset at night while you sleep. There's only so much physical output you can put out in a day. Your muscles can only handle so much, same with your neurons. So this idea that we can work endlessly without recovery and reset, don't get as much sleep, that might work for a little while, but that's going to end up nowhere good. That it runs contrary with all the science. But it's not unreasonable to suggest we could add another 50 to 100% of highly productive intelligence to what we already have if we undertake as an aggressive approach to expanding the capacity of our brains as we do our bodies when we pursue physical fitness. How might your life improve if you tap into this much more of your brain's theoretical intelligence capacity? Given that the brain is the primary determinant of your success, happiness, and fulfillment, doesn't it make sense to at least try? Okay, at the risk of getting too far in the weeds here with the science, let's understand just a little bit of how any mental experience, like a thought, feeling, or behavior, is formed, and then how it's replayed again in the future. When you have a mental experience in life, or you're learning something new, meaning you're expanding one of your intelligence domains, neurons automatically, physiologically respond in some way. Which neurons fire together, in what order, and in what rhythm, encodes the structure or an activation pattern of every mental experience we have. Therefore, every thought, emotion, action, skill, memory, piece of knowledge, perception, interpretation, any form of mental life is built and connected between many neurons using a unique electrical and chemical pattern. Mental experiences are sequences of electrical and chemical patterns in the brain. In your upper right here, you can see a neuron that's firing, that's electrical charge that's running down the neuron as it gets to the end. Upper right here where the axon terminals are, the electrical charge activates neurochemicals, which then get released into a synapse. Synapse is down here lower right. Those are chemicals that are getting exchanged. And these axon terminals up here upper right connect with dendrites at the other end of the neuron, and that's where all these connections happen. So axon terminals are like the tail of the neuron, release chemicals to the head of the neuron, the dendrites, and that's how they're all communicating. And again, you can get thousands of connections in a single neuron to other neurons, and it looks like this massive spider web in your brain. So what you see upper left here is a neuron, and these are the, like I said, the dendrites. And then down here where the terminal is, it's connecting with other dendrites from other neurons. Now again, this isn't done in a linear fashion. These things are connecting in every which direction. And what you see lower left here is like a single trunk of a dendrite, and then it starts to branch off into spines and spindles, and each of these little nubs you see on the exterior of the neuron, those are the synapses, those are the connection points, presynaptic terminals and postsynaptic terminals. That's how these little nubs are how they're communicating. So here on the left, you see an axon terminal coming in to a neuron to connect and then exchange neurochemicals, okay? And what's super groovy about these neurons and how intelligence capacity can expand is when you're working out these neurons and challenging it with learning, and you're giving it all the sustenance that it needs to grow and develop and expand, these dendrites will actually, these trees of dendrites and axon terminals will actually grow and develop. And here on the left, you see a dendrite tree that has grown and developed. So this neuron has been pushed to learn, and look at all the additional capacity that's developed here. These are all potential connection points to other neurons. So the more that we push our brain, the more that these dendrite trees and axon trees grow and develop more connection points, which means more potential information exchange, and that's what capacity looks like in the brain. So bringing this back to real life, let's say you wanted to progress in your career, right? Who doesn't? And you've been given feedback that you need to work on your leadership skills, which will open the door to advancement and hopefully help you lead an organization someday. But currently, your leadership skills are a little underdeveloped and it's holding you back. The constructive feedback that you've been given is that your messaging is not landing with the team. You're not effective at translating the company vision into relatable language. You don't frame company goals in a way that triggers team motivation. And you need to find ways to create and celebrate wins with the team to build momentum. So in neuroscience terms, I mean, what I just described are the behaviors that come out in the real world, right? But all of this is reflected in the brain. So in neuroscience terms, you have certain underdeveloped brain domains that need to be trained to increase their intelligence so you can behave differently in a way that takes the form of better leadership skills. But that doesn't mean that you're stuck, because we have this brain that's been gifted with neuroplasticity, the ability to change, adapt, and evolve. So your current leadership skills, the ones that need to be improved, are the result of patterns that you've established in your brain, resulting in an underdevelopment of that skill set. So what's needed is targeted training of the networks that underlie the needed leadership skill set that you need to develop. So underneath these 4 domains that produce better leadership are neurons, brain regions, and networks that need to be trained. New neural pathways, connections that we just looked at, need to be formed that represent new behaviors that will come across in the world as better leadership. So what's happening in the brain as we do all this is the neurons are moving around and connecting to one another, communicating the new patterns with neurochemicals and strengthening the pattern each time we practice it. So when we train things, it requires a ton of repetition and practice, okay? Because these neurons, when we do something brand new, will temporarily come together to form that initial pattern that we're creating, but they're very, very weakly and loosely connected. And the only way that they get stronger and become habit is through practice and through motivation, emotional salience. And I'm not going to get too deep into that, but whenever we feel highly motivated to do something and emotionally invested, the brain tags these new patterns that we're practicing and training with special neurochemicals called dopamine, serotonin, and when it tags it, that makes it stand out like an asterisk in the brain, because the brain is highly interested in doing things that motivate you because it loves dopamine. Hello, it's what motivates us. And so it follows things and wants to predict things and replay them that motivate us, okay? So when we're developing these new skills, what I work on with people is make sure that we're crafting a motivation case around them, which helps trigger this dopamine and serotonin so these patterns get highly energized so that the brain wants to do them over and over again. All right, over time, with a consistent approach, the brain starts to predict these new patterns and simulate them into your consciousness instead of the old patterns which represented the less than adequate leadership skills. So what we're doing is we're trying to move and shift from old patterns that aren't working in our life, that are unhelpful, develop new patterns that represent a more helpful way of being, tag them emotionally with these special neurochemicals, and practice the heck out of them. And before you know it, we're shifting, okay? The brain is actually predicting these new ways of being. And that's a whole nother, prediction is a whole nother concept in the brain that if you're interested, we can go over another time, but we don't have time today. So, okay. So this concludes our discussion on expanding intelligence, which is the first pillar of brain performance. We'll move through the remaining pillars more briskly. The second pillar is what I call filling the mental resource tank. We've touched on this a little bit, but let's think of your brain like a car. No matter how performance your car is, it won't run unless it has oil, gas, and functioning engine parts. The same is true for your brain. As we learned earlier, the brain weighs 2 pounds but consumes 25% of our calories. It's running 24/7, even performing functions while you sleep. The brain requires energy in the form of ATP, neurotransmitters, hydration to lubricate all the plumbing up there, enzymes which help produce the energy for the brain, healthy fats for the structures of the brain, protein, and it also needs attention bandwidth. To produce these inputs so the brain can function and run properly, we need to supply it with a steady stream of raw materials like protein, healthy fats, carbs, complex please, because complex carbs release glucose into the bloodstream gradually. We don't want to eat simple carbs or added sugar because sugar floods into the bloodstream. It spikes into the brain. And then the problem is there's nothing behind it. There's no steady stream of ongoing glucose because all we did was eat simple carbs and they burn themselves out. And then we crash. Oxygen, water, vitamin B, C, and E, electrolytes. I don't know how many of you drink electrolytes with your water. Highly encourage you to do so. Electrolytes are calcium, magnesium, potassium, and sodium. The neurotransmitters actually use these to open and close their gates to make the connections with other neurons. If you're not getting enough electrolytes, your neurons can't work properly. They won't fire. As soon as we wake up and begin to think, feel, and act, the brain ramps up its consumption of ATP, which is the energy form the brain uses made from glucose and oxygen. It starts consuming neurotransmitters, vitamins, minerals to run its brain function. So if you wake up and you start running your brain and you're not immediately starting to fuel it with protein, vitamins and minerals and carbs, the brain doesn't have storage tanks for all this fuel. It burns it as it needs it. So that's why we're told early on in the day to start eating protein. Carbs and healthy fats, preferably all together, complex carbs, so that we're starting to put raw materials into our bloodstream that can travel to the brain and so the brain has its raw materials that it needs to start making its neurotransmitters and other inputs that it needs to provide the fuel that the brain needs to function. Okay. So the difference between a car and a brain is a car has a gas tank for storage of its fuel. While there's very little storage capacity in the brain for its fuel, so it needs to produce what it needs on an ongoing basis as it needs it. So if it doesn't get a steady stream of the raw materials all day long, every day at regular intervals, it'll run out of fuel, which results in you feeling sluggish, fatigued, fogged, anxious, irritable, and other mental unpleasantness. Attention bandwidth, or how much we can pay attention to anything during the day, is also a finite resource. The attention domain in the brain, which is a network of interrelated brain parts, that allows us to focus on a task, is powered by what's called the dorsal attention network, which is comprised of neurons, same as every other brain network. All neurons not only require a constant source of resources for fuel, but also have a limited bandwidth. In other words, they fatigue during the day. We can strengthen and widen that bandwidth through training, but at the end of the day, it has a limited bandwidth. So these neurons get tired out as we use them during the day. Kind of like your muscles have a limited bandwidth. You can't run or lift weights endlessly. Your muscles run out of bandwidth. We can train the attention domain to increase its bandwidth capacity by practicing paying attention in training exercises like meditation, meaning the neurons can get fitter and better at locking in for longer periods of time through this training. But there will always be a limit as to how much attention we can access in a day. Therefore, it's important we treasure and allocate our attention bandwidth each day, not waste it on frivolous things, applying it strategically and wisely to the activities that give us the biggest ROI. The nervous system is the body's master communication network. This is the third pillar of brain performance. It carries signals between the brain, spinal cord, and every organ, muscle, and gland in the body. The brain is the air traffic control tower of the nervous system. It interprets incoming signals from your body and from the outside environment and sends instructions throughout the body as to how to respond. Your mental activity, your thoughts, emotions, behaviors, thinking, focus, memory, is built on how well this system is regulated. When the nervous system is stuck in the wrong state, like chronic fight or flight, stress mode, or dorsal vagal shutdown freeze mode, the brain can't access certain higher order thinking parts of the brain. If you've ever noticed it when you're stressed out and highly activated, how you just can't think, that is because your brain's number one job is to survive. And when it feels under threat, AKA stressed out, it is pulling resources from your cognitive parts of your brain into the survival networks of the brain, the limbic network, because its number one priority is to keep you safe. So when you're perceiving threat, you are shutting down thinking parts of your brain. Stress pulls resources away from executive function, learning, creativity, and emotional regulation. In short, the wrong nervous system state skews or shuts down mental performance. Chronic stress burns your mental resources at an accelerated rate. So we have this limited tank of resources. When we're in highly activated, chronic, ongoing stress mode, we are on the accelerator, burning gas at an accelerated rate. You know what it's like when you're driving 100 miles an hour, your MPG is tanking. It keeps cortisol level elevated, burning through glucose, neurotransmitters, and attention bandwidth. Over time, this starves the prefrontal cortex, it shrinks our working memory, lowers focus, and leaves your mental tank depleted. Staying in this state for too long leads to burnout. By learning to recognize your nervous system state in the moment and practicing techniques to shift it in and out of states as you need them, you can match your brain to the task at hand. This protects your mental resources, prevents waste, and ensures your energy is available when it matters most. Think of your nervous system as a dimmer switch on the wall. When the situation calls for being able to see clearly in the room and focus on something, we turn the dimmer switch up high. When it's time to have a conversation with a friend and chill out a little bit, maybe we move the dimmer switch to medium. And when it's time to be romantic, well, I don't need to tell you where you set the dimmer switch in those moments, do I? The point is, there is an appropriate nervous system state for every situation you have throughout the day. If you leave the dimmer switch on high all day long, you burn more electricity and your utility bill is higher. If you leave your nervous system on high all day long, you burn through your mental resources much faster. You start experiencing skewed thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and your brain health starts to be impacted long term. Being aware of and managing your nervous system state has a big impact on brain performance, and it's the third pillar. The last pillar is how we spend our mental resources, and it also dramatically affects brain performance. We already discussed how to fill our mental resource tank in pillar 2 and noted that these mental resources are finite each day. Your brain only has so much fuel each day. You can fill the tank and expand its capacity, but if you spend these resources carelessly, you'll still run out. This pillar of brain performance is learning how to direct your attention with strategically, manage your effort, minimize unhelpful mental patterns, and consume brain fuel with precision. When you spend resources wisely, you protect your brain from waste. You conserve energy for what matters, and you turn limited daily fuel into sustainable high performance. This is all about living each day with a brain-first approach, giving the brain what it needs at each moment and spending resources efficiently with a plan. Multitasking drains energy unnecessarily. Every switch between tasks forces the brain to reset its attention network. It burns extra glucose and neurotransmitters as it's doing the switching. What feels like more productivity when you multitask is actually really just a resource leakage. You actually get less done and you're prone to more mistakes. Focus is an investment and a resource conserver. Directing your attention to one task at a time actually reduces waste and channels your mental resources into meaningful, productive output. You actually get an ROI on your attention spend when you focus. Rumination wastes fuel. Looping on worries or regrets keeps working memory stuck on repeat. It's spending precious energy on the same thing over and over again without any forward progress or accomplishing anything productive. Taking breaks during the day is not laziness. Your brain needs it. This is what we talked about earlier, looking at your brain objectively as a partner. Your brain has needs. It requires that you understand what those needs are and give it what it needs when it needs it. Short pauses, especially those that involve movement, to increase blood flow, so these raw materials start flowing quicker up to the brain, let neurons reset and neurotransmitters replenish, protecting your tank for sustained productivity all day long. Motivation multiplies mental resource efficiency. When doing a task aligns with your goals and values, the brain spends less resources to get it done, making resource use far more efficient. So in other words, when you're motivated to do something, it conserves resources. When you're not motivated and you feel the negative mental friction of having to grind through something, it requires more resources because it requires you to engage your frontal cortexes more intently, and there's no part of the brain that burns more resources than your cognitive frontal cortexes. Mental friction of any type burns fuel fast. Multitasking, rumination, lack of motivation, and other efficiencies force the brain to work harder for less output. These states accelerate resource spend, drain your mental tank, and leave less energy for tasks that truly matter. In short, stay focused on one thing at a time and sustain it until you're done. Stay away from unhelpful mental patterns. Take recovery breaks with movement every 90 minutes. Train your brain to be motivated by how well you stay in alignment with your values, your beliefs, and in the steady progress you're making towards your goals. We need to find reward in the progress, not in the end result. Efficiency is leverage. It's not just how much mental fuel you have, it's how wisely you spend it. Mastering resource efficiency transforms effort into impact and keeps your brain performing at its best day after day. At long last, in summary, brain performance matters because the brain is the most important organ we have. It runs every system in the body, and it's the control tower for our success, fulfillment, and happiness. Brain performance exists on a broad spectrum, just as broad as physical fitness. You might not be fully aware of how broad the spectrum is unless you are living a life dedicated to putting your brain first. Brain performance determines how much intelligence, energy, clarity, and control we bring to our daily life challenges. The good news is brain performance is not fixed, it's trainable, and it's affectable by understanding how the brain works and then putting that knowledge into building a lifestyle that creates the conditions for your brain to be at its best. As we discussed, the four pillars that make up brain performance are intelligence capacity, which is the 16 domains of intelligence, such as memory, attention, reasoning, emotional regulation, etc. And they're trainable like muscles. More intelligence capacity equals more capability. Filling the mental resource tank, glucose, protein, healthy fats, oxygen, hydration, vitamins, and minerals are the raw materials that our brain needs. If you don't fill the tank and keep filling it consistently all day, performance crashes and your productivity and mood follows. Nervous system regulation. Your nervous system state, whether it's fight or flight, calm and alert, into rest and recovery, or dorsal vagal shutdown, determines which brain circuits are online or offline. Regulation of your nervous system state equals control of your brain performance. And lastly, spending mental resources efficiently, even with a full tank. Careless spending like multitasking, rumination, distraction, and chronic stress drains resources. Efficient spending transforms effort into ROI. So, neuroscience education and coaching, why does it work so well? Well, most brain performance methods focus on surface level tactics, productivity hacks, stress tips, or mindset shifts. While possibly helpful in the short term, these approaches don't last because they don't change the neural wiring or architecture that underlies the creation of our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors of our entire mental life. It's like trimming the branches of a sick tree. You're getting rid of the symptoms temporarily, but because the roots of the tree are still sick, the symptoms grow right back. Neuroscience does its work in the roots of the brain, where all things mental that affect performance are rooted. When you change the root structure, the neuron level, you change what grows out of these roots, and it's lasting. Neuroscience addresses performance at the source by working directly with the brain's operating system. The brain works based on how it's wired. If you don't change the wiring, you can't change your way of being in the long term. That's the science. It's just how it works. In neuroscience education and training, you learn how to fill your mental resource tank, spend your resources wisely, expand the tank capacity, including your intelligence. This isn't about pushing harder or relying on willpower. It's about training and rewiring your brain to run more efficiently. So the pain points or brain performance poor brain performance doesn't get just patched, they get resolved at the root. Traditional mental health and personal growth methods often work at the surface level, thoughts, emotions, and habits, but not what is forming those thoughts, emotions, and habits at the root level. Neuroscience education and coaching works because it targets the root systems of mental life, the neurons, the networks, the neurotransmitters, the nervous system states that form all our mental life at the deepest levels of our brain. When you change the root, you automatically change the branches. This is why neuroscience training creates faster, far more sustainable results than willpower or mindset approaches that are typically temporary fixes. Neuroscience education goes beyond knowledge. It fulfills our core psychological needs. It gives you stability by providing clarity about why you think, feel, and act the way you do. It creates autonomy by showing you that your brain is trainable and that you can guide and rewire its patterns yourself throughout your entire life. And it builds a sense of skillfulness by equipping you with practical tools to manage stress, sharpen focus, and elevate performance. In short, you can train yourself to become your own little mini neuroscientist and manage and command your own brain for the rest of your life. Here's the shameless plug part of the program. If you're interested in exploring optimizing brain performance with me, I have two options for you. One is one-on-one education and coaching, or a community-based monthly membership option. I just launched the Brain Club this week. It's the first of its kind membership community built to train your brain the way you train your body. It gives you practical neuroscience education, strategies, and tools to optimize performance, expand intelligence, manage your nervous system state, manage mental resources, create a new identity, develop new mental patterns, and unlock untapped potential and performance. Inside the community, you'll find a complete system of support and education, step-by-step learning modules, weekly live education lessons, in-depth articles, and a neuroscience-based newsletter to keep you growing every week. You'll have access to weekly office hours, give you a chance to ask questions directly with me about what you're learning, or speak to me about your personal journey. And you'll always have the option to message me directly for immediate support or to set up one-on-one coaching calls as part of the Brain Club. And you're not doing it alone. You're joining a community of professionals just like you who are serious about growth with discussions, accountability, encouragement that turn knowledge into lasting transformation. And as Bucknell alumni, you'll also gain access to a private alumni-only space inside the club. It's the perfect way to reconnect with your fellow alumni and mix brain training with professional networking. And now's the best time to join. It just launched. We're offering exclusive founding membership deals, discounted pricing for life, and special recognition inside the community. You also get 2 weeks of free trial. As a founding member, you won't just benefit from the program, you'll help shape the future of my club and also brain training for everyone. I really think that professionals across the world can benefit by having more intimate understanding of how their brain works and how to leverage its capability for their lives. If you prefer to work one-on-one and have the ability, you have the ability to do that as either part of the Brain Club or outside of it, whatever suits you best. The QR code here is for access to the landing page of the Brain Club. You see my email address here, my website. Feel free to reach out to me, send me any additional questions or thoughts that you might have. Thank you so much for your time today and attending. And oh my goodness, I ran over.
George, thank you so much. This was absolutely incredibly informative. I feel like I've just had a crash course on the brain. It was so wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. And everybody needs a break now. They need to go do that 5-minute movement, do some squats or run around the neighborhood.
Well, this was really just wonderful. I so appreciate you taking the time to share all of your expertise with us. I know I learned a lot from this. And as George said, thank you for everyone who joined us today. We hope that you'll join us for upcoming 360s as well. I'm dropping into the chat here a link for our upcoming 360, which is October 24th. It's alumna Joya Das, who will be talking about how to monetize your personal brand. We do have a few questions that came in through the Q&A feature. George, do you have a few minutes to go through some questions?
Oh yeah.
Great. So wonderful. One of them is asking if you will be able to share your slides with us.
Yeah, certainly. People just need to email me and I'll send them a copy of the slides.
Perfect. Wonderful. Let's see here. So another question is, it says, excellent presentation. Thank you. Does the brain have, quote, refined means to communicate its needs state with us? Being tired, unfocused, or of course, easy to spot. Is deeper understanding of a particular brain state possible?
Could you read that one more time? I'm sorry.
Sure. It says, does the brain have refined means to communicate its needs or state to us? So they suggest being tired and unfocused as being a way that the brain is sort of letting you know that it's in some trouble.
Yeah. So we all have psychologically 6 core psychological needs that we're all trying to achieve, and they're the same for all of us. We all just have them in different proportions in our lives, and even these needs, how we prioritize them can evolve. So it starts with autonomy, equality, skillfulness, stability, significance, and togetherness. So all of our lives, we're in service of those needs in one form or another. And so when we are not meeting one or more of those needs, our brain tells us that I've got friction. And so that typically means when we're experiencing friction of some type that we're not meeting a need or we're not acting or being in alignment with our identity. In other words, we're doing things that are not in alignment with how we think we should be in our lives at that moment. So mental friction is a great communication from your brain that's telling you something's not right. And that's information that is worth listening to and diving into and figuring out the source.
Right, wonderful. Another question that came through and is, do you feel that supplements such as creatine monohydrate can help with brain function?
Yeah, absolutely. So generally speaking, we can get all that the brain needs through diet. But if we're not getting enough, we can supplement it. And so there's a lot of, ongoing research into this in terms of what supplements are helpful, what aren't. Um, but again, the brain needs steady doses of protein, uh, carbohydrates, therefore glucose, healthy fats. So like if you're not getting enough healthy fat from things like olive oil, avocados, salmon, etc., a lot of people take omega 3s. So that's part of what we do in the, brain club is to really understand, people's diets, what they are consuming, what they're getting from their diets, and then ways to supplement it if they're not getting enough. Um, but at the end of the day, it's critical that the brain gets everything it needs in one form or another, or it won't function properly.
Think that's all the questions. There are, of course, quite a few comments thanking you for the valuable information and for your time, saying excellent presentation. I can't agree more. This was phenomenal. So really do appreciate you taking the time to join us today. I think it's very easy for all of us to take things for granted. And I think the brain is absolutely one of those things that we just expect to be at its peak performance all the time. But it's important for us to be treating it as you said, as a partner.
As a member of the family, yep, treat it like a
Yep.
member of the family.
Love that. I will be thinking about things differently going forward. Thank you again, George. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
My
And of
pleasure.
course, to all of our attendees, thank you for joining us. Hope to see you at the next one.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.